Hello students, and welcome to the video mini lesson on details and language. Similar to the other video, right, I'm going to define the terms, we'll look at the terms in action, and I'm going to demonstrate how to analyze their use within a passage, right, moving beyond simply noting that they are there. So let's start off with a definition, right? What are details? Details are pieces of information that an author includes or excludes for a specific purpose. Translation, or in other words, details are facts and information that the author includes or leaves out because including them or leaving them out helps the author achieve something in their text, a specific goal that they have. A quick example. On the left, you have one version of this text. A man walks into a store. He walks up to the two salespeople and says, "Hello, could you help me look for something?" The two salespeople both answer at the same time. Now, the second passage with a detail included. A man walks into a high-end clothing store. He walks up to two salespeople and says, "Hello, could you help me look for something?" The two salespeople both answer at the same time. How does the detail about the type of store impact your predictions for what will happen? We're going to come back to this idea. So first, how do details work? More or less information will impact a reader's reaction. If the reader has more information, like this, right? A man walks into a high-end clothing store, the detail triggers the reader's pre-existing notions of what this environment will be like and how employees will act, how the person will feel within the store, etc. If there's less information, if you just had a man walks into a store, the lack of detail keeps the readers in the dark. Maybe the author wants to surprise them. Maybe the type of store isn't actually important to the story. Something else is actually more important, and that's why the author decided not to put details there, but to put the detail somewhere else where it was important. A word of caution, right? You need to make sure that you're being aware of stereotypes, right? So always look for some other piece of evidence to support any assertions that you make about a reader's reaction. So here, right, if you're going to be looking for, if you make the assertion, lots of people feel a certain kind of way when they go into a high-end clothing store, you probably want something else to back that up because you don't want to come across as stereotyping all high-end clothing stores or all people's reactions when they walk into those stores. So, for example, if the narrator had also described the man as being dressed poorly, it would be easier to kind of start making those assumptions, right? And again, those triggers would start going off. And that's because, again, more information leads to more informed readers, right? And they have a very specific way of reacting. So when it comes to analyzing details, you want to discuss what is and is not known. So step one, right, is discuss what is there. A man walks into a high-end clothing store, right? The detail about it being a high-end clothing store likely is included to signal to readers that the man will not be greeted warmly, okay? Talk about what isn't there. The narrator doesn't tell us what the man looks like or how he is dressed. This lack of detail may be designed to make his acceptance or rejection more surprising later on in the text, right? Or maybe the author doesn't want us to kind of pay attention to that at that moment. It'll come up later. Then the third step is to discuss how the info impacts readers, right? Discuss how the info may or how the info is likely to impact readers. If you use phrases like, may or typically or likely, then you won't fall into that trap of stereotyping readers and making them think that everybody thinks or acts the same way. Right, so not telling us how the man is dressed may be designed to make his acceptance or rejection more surprising later in the text. Okay, so this is not analysis, right? If you talk about detail in your paragraph and you just write, the author gives us details so we will know more information, he or she also does this to help us understand the situation better, that's not analysis. right? That's telling me that, it's stating the obvious. This is analysis. The narrator uses details in the passage for a variety of reasons. At first, the narrator includes a detail about the store being a high-end clothing store. The narrator could have simply said it was a clothing store, but the detail that it is a high-end store signals to the readers that money and wealth will be important in the exchange. Typically, only rich people shop at these stores, so the man will either be greeted warmly by the staff or rejected, depending on how rich he looks. The author neglects to give us this detail, however. We don't know anything about the man's appearance or wealth, and this lack of detail is likely designed to build suspense or make the exchange he has with the store's employees more dramatic. Okay, again, pointing out, you'll notice I say things like the narrator could have, right? Or typically, right? The author neglects to give us this detail. We don't know anything, etc. This lack of detail is likely designed. Again, I don't want to stereotype my readers, so I talk about typical reactions while also kind of setting it up so that there is wiggle room for interpretation. So let's talk about what language is. Language is the general description of words and phrases used in a text. It is also the use of words and phrases that are designed to be figurative, not literal. In other words, language is the general tone or type of words used in a text, or the way you would describe a general conversation in a text. It's also the use of words and phrases that are not meant to be taken literally, like simile, hyperbole, personification, etc. A quick example of language. A man walks into a small shop squeezed like a grape between two larger, more modern stores. As he opens the door, a moldy 2x4 hits his nose. The smell is so pervasive. The air outside was damp, but the small space heater by the shop's front door breathes warmly against the man's exposed hands and face. As he walked towards the salesperson, the sound of smooth instrumental music wrapped around him, blanketing him in coziness and comfort. We will return to this passage in a moment. So how language works. Use of language impacts how we feel. It's just like diction, right? So a positive reaction, right? Brad skipped like a 6-year-old through the colorful fallen leaves. The simile comparing Brad to a 6-year-old usually makes people feel positively because childhood is usually associated with happiness. Negative. The entire Atlantic Ocean had pooled in the bottom of Brad's Nikes, making his feet cold and wet. The hyperbole of how much water is in Brad's shoes helps accentuate the negative feeling of having wet feet. And then neutral. Brad was walking, it was rainy outside, his feet got wet. The language here would be described as monotone and flat, right? Or devoid of excitement or emphasis. The tone is merely factual or objective, so there's no emotion involved. Okay, you'll also notice, that's why it's got the star next to it, that this typically happens, the use of figurative language is mostly going to kind of stick you in one of these two categories, right? It's either going to make you feel positively or help you understand that something is positive, or make you feel negatively or help you understand that something is negative. Authors don't typically use figurative language to achieve a neutral tone. So analyzing language, right? First, you want to discuss the tones and then discuss the devices. So step 1, identify the general tone. Brad skipped like a 6-year-old through the colorful fallen leaves. The general tone is descriptive, right? It's describing what Brad is doing. Step 2 is discuss the use of any figurative meaning, right? Brad skipped like a 6-year-old. The use of a simile comparing Brad to a child is designed to show the readers that Brad is happy, and or it could be interpreted, right, that Brad is childish. We would need to read further in the passage to kind of figure out which of those two is more accurate for what the author is trying to achieve. Then the third step, right, is to look for patterns. Ask yourself questions like, why is this general tone used, right? Why did the author decide to use a descriptive tone here? You should also ask yourself, why does the author take the time to add figurative language here? Right? They could have put it somewhere else. Why is this particular moment or piece of information so important that it gets described figuratively? Right? Authors don't randomly use similes or randomly use hyperbole. They usually use it for a very specific reason, and your job is to kind of figure out what that reason is. So if we go back to the example that we looked at from earlier, let me do the pointer, right? When you look at that first part, right, a small shop squeezed like a grape between two larger, more modern stores, right? This is a simile comparing the store to a grape. Unpacking that a little bit, right? Grapes squish easily, right, or just are destroyed easily. My question, and when I read this, was immediately like, is this a comment on the vulnerability of the store? Like, is the store in danger of being crushed? Like, either literally, like, crushed, or potentially going out of business, crushed. The next piece of figurative language is the description of the moldy 2x4. Sorry, let me move this. A moldy 2x4 hits his nose. The smell is so pervasive, right? This is a hyperbole, exaggerating the potency of the scent with the act of getting hit in the face with an actual physical board, right? The smell doesn't actually hit you like a board does. So the hyperbole is designed to show you how unpleasant the smell is, okay? The next one is about the space heater breathes warmly against the man's exposed hands and face, right? This is personification, right? The space heater, an inanimate object, is being given a human capability, right? To breathe, to breathe hot air onto the man's hands and face. And then the last one, right? The sounds of smooth instrumental music wrap around him, blanketing him in coziness and comfort. This is a metaphor comparing comfortable sounds all around you, right? Like that kind of like surround sound of pleasantness with being folded in a warm blanket and feeling comfortable that way as well. So the question here, right, would be, how would you describe the general language within the passage, right? In general, it's all descriptive, but we also, again, looking for that pattern, we also notice that, let me get this out of the way, sorry. We also notice that it moves from, hey, this is kind of dangerous, or I'm worried about the shop, hey, this is an unpleasant smell, to all of a sudden, hey, these are actually pleasant things, right? Once the guy is in the store long enough to get warm, it starts to be good. And once he starts going towards the back of the store to talk to the salespeople, the music is making him feel even more comfortable. So there's a shift from unpleasant to pleasant. Again, this is not analysis, right? The passage uses figurative language. The author uses simile, metaphor, and hyperbole. All that is labeling. Okay, you've just told me what the author has used, but you haven't told me why they used it or why that is important. This is analysis. The author uses descriptive language coupled with simile, metaphor, hyperbole, and personification to describe the scene. The general language used in the passage is descriptive, and the use of figurative language helps the author move from a negative tone to a positive one. The author uses a simile comparing the store to a grape being squeezed. This simile is likely designed to show how vulnerable the store is, the same way that a grape is vulnerable when being squished between two large objects. The author then uses a hyperbole to exaggerate the moldy wood smell within the store. This may be an indication that the store is old. The use of this hyperbole and the simile about the grape may indicate that the store is in danger of closing because it is too old and being squeezed out of the neighborhood. This usually makes people feel bad. However, the store is a pleasant place. The personification of the space heater breathing warmly on the man and the metaphor about the music inside the shop enveloping you the same way a warm blanket does are both positive. Okay. That's the end of this video. Thank you for watching. And if you have further questions, please don't hesitate to ask. And be sure to look at the other videos analyzing diction, imagery, syntax, and thesis construction.